Made in America. I don't always see that on the things I buy. It's amazing. Made in India, made in China, made in Mexico. It's just amazing, all the things that you see. And it's a little bit concerning sometimes that we don't see more made in America. But I want to talk about things that were made and continue to be made in America that no other nation on this planet has come close to equaling. So let me talk to you about America. And when I talk about America, I'm talking about the people that make America great. And I do believe that we are one of the greatest nations of all history. And I do believe there's some sovereign things that have happened in this country. But it's the people, the families, that have made this nation what it is. I have a burden to save a nation today. I have a burden to save a community today. And I know that that nation is made up of communities, and our community is made up of families, and our families are made up of individual people, and it boils down to how you choose to live your life. Made in America. Speaking about how you choose to live your life, I'd like to talk about a beautiful girl, Aliza Brooks. Aliza was the 2012 homecoming queen for Ohio State University. Anybody like me, a big-time Buckeye Ohio State fan? Wow, that was weak. My story is very simple. When I was a kid, I walked 6 blocks to school, and there was a Buckeye tree, actually 2 or 3, and I used to gather Buckeyes and save them in shoe boxes. I don't know what the deal was, but I had a fascination with Buckeyes. So God called me at an early age to be an Ohio State fan. I think you're getting way ahead of me there, so just hold off on me, all right? And I always announce my slides. Thank you so much. I realize that you've had to really work hard the last 3 weeks. That was just said in jest. But anyhow, I love Buckeyes. So I am very interested in Ohio Buckeye sports, and I began collecting Reds baseball when I was 10, and this afternoon, I will be in Cincinnati for the football game. Pastor Curtis and Amanda, it was her idea, gave me the most wonderful birthday present. They bought 2 tickets for Curtis and I to go and sit and watch the game. And Curtis will have on his Bengals stuff, and he'll be rooting for the Bengals, and I'll be beside him rooting for the winner. It's going to be a wonderful game today. So what's it mean to be a Buckeye? Well, Liza Brooks said, to me, being a Buckeye means opportunity. It means that I'm part of the most incredible family in the world. And she was in some ways talking about her university family. But I want to show you how that it was more than her university family. On the 7th of October, she was crowned homecoming queen of Ohio State University. The day before, she had turned 18. But something else happened to that beautiful blonde that you see in the middle. On that Saturday, her papa, he had a stroke early Saturday morning. And she knew when she was being crowned queen that her papa was in the hospital and in very serious condition, even the widowmaker stroke here in the back at the lower part of the brain. She is the granddaughter of Everett and Merle Hibbard. And Everett, her papa, was in the hospital. So she, after being crowned, told her court and the president of the school, who she's close to, that she would not be at any of the 22 parties on Sunday held in her honor. And she missed every single party because she was down here at the hospital and sat with him. And they thought she probably won't come, but she did come. They thought if she comes, she'll probably stay an hour. She sat with her papaw from noon to 8:30 Sunday evening. That is a homecoming queen. Let's just look at home today. Let's turn our heart to our homeland. As I preach a message that I received on the runway of John Wayne Airport, literally, God gave me 3 sermons going down the runway, and this is going to blow your mind. He gave me 3 sermons, a website, and a future assignment that I'm to do. And you will hear about all of it Sunday by Sunday between now and 2 weeks from today. So this Sunday, next Sunday, and the 18th. And you're going to be amazed at how quickly God can speak. And I've been that way most of my life. I don't get little tidbits. I get like a load of potatoes just dumped in my lap. If I'm going to look at America, I'm going to have to be objective. And being objective, no one can study our history and not realize it's a history of faith. America is a history of the people of faith. The Pilgrims that came and founded the Plymouth colony in 1620 came by boat called the Mayflower. I actually collected a list of the names of all the families on board the Mayflower. And it was very interesting to go down through all the families that were listed as families on the Mayflower. I began to search to see if there was any that had the same name as any of our members. And I was blessed when I saw that one of our ladies, one of our wonderful ladies, not only has her name, her husband's family name, but they even spell it right. And that would be Rogers. And one of the families on the Mayflower was Rogers, as Edna Rogers, as her former husband, now in heaven, Clayton Rogers. So T.C. Rogers and Randy Rogers and Gail Rogers, who gave up a Mayflower name to become a Willis. Can you believe that? And all that bunch back there is clapping because they love the Willis family because they're all Willis clan. See, we were a bunch of clans in the beginning, and we were a bunch of families. But these families came with specific purposes, and let me talk about that. You'll find that we are founded on a rock, Plymouth Rock, I guess could be said, but 2 types of people were on that ship. There were Pilgrims, and there were Puritans. And many people, just without full information, think it's all one and the same. Well, the Pilgrims, well, the Puritans, well, the Pilgrims, well, the Puritans. But there was really a difference in them, and they both play a key part, and I actually feel an attachment to both. The Pilgrims were people who had looked at the Church of England that they'd been a part of. They did not like its excesses. They did not like its celebratory things, all of its pomp and circumstance. They didn't like all the hierarchy and politics. And the Pilgrims believed that the church was somewhat corrupt and backslid from the true Christian faith, and they believed they had to separate and be separatists. And sometimes Pilgrims were called separatists because they would separate. And not only did they separate, but they also, if we can put the word separate up, not only did they separate, but they believed in being very, very simple. That's the two things about pilgrims. They would separate and they were simple. In addition to that, it translated into everything they did, and that's why there was so much simplicity. And for you that don't know, they had a heart for the natives in the nation which they landed. These are not the people that scoured the land and devoured it. That came out of commerce and things over time, but this is 1620, and they actually needed those Indians to help them survive, and the Indians brought the food. And it's interesting, too, that so many people think that they taught the Indians a lot about that. They actually found that when they landed there in the New England coast, that the Indians already were farmers and fishers and were already very skilled at it and had learned it long before, actually centuries before, from people that had arrived. Now the Puritans, they still believed in a commitment to the Church of England, but they believed that there was a chance to reform it. They wanted to work with the system. They wanted to reform the Church of England, and they believed that there could be a reforming and a renewing of the Church of England. Reform and renew. So that's the two types of people that you had, was pilgrims who would be separate from. We want nothing to do with the Church of England. We want a more simple lifestyle. Puritans who wanted to get back to the rudiments of the religious faith of Christianity, but let's still be part of the Church of England. Let's try to have a new type of Church of England, one that's had a revival or one that's had a renewal. And I believe right now both are necessary. Both are necessary. I just described a missionary a few moments ago, and he would have never accomplished what he accomplished if he had not been a part of a denomination that has been one of the farthest reaching missions organizations in the entire history of the world. And he would have not have done it if he hadn't had the faith to step beyond even boundaries they set. So sometimes it's the combination of recognizing that God works through things old and things new, that we need the structure, the securities, the systems, but we also need the spontaneity and the spirit and the specifications that God is giving at any one particular time. Now, jot this one down if you don't mind. It's a website. It's called thrivingfamily.com. And thrivingfamily.com is a great website. It's family focus. It's focus on the families, thrivingfamily.com. And they have a magazine that's similar, and it's just an incredible site. I would encourage you go there and get acquainted with that, because we live in a time when you are going to want to have a thriving family. And you're going to want to teach your children and grandchildren things that are vital. And grandparents, don't check out too early, because statistics show grandchildren are more affected on faith issues by grandparents than by parents. So it's so important that we step up. A lady named Rebecca Hagelin wrote an article that was first published in 2010 in the magazine that they have, the Thriving Family magazine, and her original article was called Faith and Our Founding Fathers. I don't usually just read when I preach. I tend to say things rather than read things. But I can't say it better than this lady said it. The freedoms we enjoy in America today originated in Judeo-Christian ideals that date back long before the American Revolution. Matthew Spalding, author of We Still Hold These Truths, Rediscovering Our Principles, Reclaiming Our Future, he says, of the many influences that shaped the American concept of liberty, the first and most formative was faith. Indeed, America was the first country in all of history that was deliberately formed to protect and promote religious freedom. Our founders rightly noted that people don't give people freedom, God does. In 1620, pilgrims seeking to practice Christianity within their own political community wrote the Mayflower Compact. As stated in the compact, their new colony was established, quote, for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith. I'll just interject. Why is that not being taught in our schools? The spirit of the Mayflower Compact is reflected in other national documents that would come later in American history, including the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. In each of these documents, the dignity and value of every human being, a fundamental principle of the Christian faith, is reflected. America's history is unique in that our founders designed a government to protect our God-given rights. Let me back up. Our founders designed a government that would protect our God-given rights. Evidence of this intent can clearly be seen in the Declaration of Independence, where our founders penned these words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." She continued to write in her article, "Sadly, courts today seem intent on undermining the religious freedoms and Christian practices that were so vital to our founding fathers and early America's way of life. One example is the court's intent to redefine the concept of wall of separation between church and state. As you know, that terminology was first used by Thomas Jefferson in a letter to explain the First Amendment exists to protect religious freedom from government interference. This quote has since been dangerously twisted into government-sanctioned suppression of religious expression on the public square. Our children need to know the truth about the influence of Christian faith in American history. In fact, the very future of our nation depends on a revitalization of the free practice of Judeo-Christian principles in public life. We're going to have to go back. I need everybody to put a hand up toward God and read it with me. Our children need to know the truth about the influence of the Christian faith in American history. In fact, the very future of our nation depends on a revitalization of the free principles of Judeo-Christian principles in public life, the free practices of Judeo-Christian principles in public life. I like Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin's been my hope. Marty Huff told me about Ben Franklin years ago. He said, you know, Johnny, I've never seen anybody who cuts to the bottom line as quick as you do. Robin Piper, former prosecutor who I was friends with and remain friends with, he would always tell me that. He'd say, Johnny, you're quick. You get the whole picture so quick. He said, that's one thing I liked about having you at Children's Services was you could get the whole picture and know exactly what was going on quickly. But said, you always got there so far ahead of everybody else that sometimes that made it difficult in communications. Yeah, I know, my life story. Marty Huff had another compliment. He said, you know, Benjamin Franklin was actually pretty rude when he was younger, kind of like you are. And he said, as Benjamin Franklin aged, he made a determination to become more personable and people-friendly, and said Ben Franklin wound up being known as one of the most congenial, kind, courteous, and considerate people. And so he was casting a shadow for me there, and that's been my goal. I've been working on it a long, long time. It breaks my heart when I find out that I still offend somebody, but I don't mind it if the offense is purely over truth, but I don't like it when the offense is over my style of presenting it. I want to speak the truth in love. And I really do like it when I am able to do that well. I did a funeral up in the church I pastored for 13 years. I did it this last spring. And when I got done, one of the elders' wives who was in leadership when I arrived there in 87, when I was 25, came up and shook my hand. I remember I was her pastor in 87, and now here it was 2012. And she said to me, all these years later, she said, wow, you've turned out to be a sweet old man. And then she added that, I'm so surprised. It was a wonderful thing. Benjamin Franklin is my hope that I will be remembered. He was the sweetest old man. And I hope that when young pastors of the future are walking around here, people will mumble under their breath and say, he's so snotty and catty and arrogant, and walks away while I'm talking. We need sweet old Pastor Sloan back. Well, I've already had all those other things said about me, so I would like to have that sweet old Pastor Sloan. Benjamin Franklin, he may have been sweet, but he publicly called for prayer during the Constitutional Convention in 1787. He said, I have lived, sir, he addressed the chairman, I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We've been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. That's our history. One of the beautiful drawings, pictures of the Congressional Congress is their bowing in prayer. George Washington bowed at the ballot box before he cast his own ballot for the first president of the United States. That means I should be able to walk in to my polling place at Brookwood Elementary Tuesday morning. My wife's already voted. But I should be able to walk in, go to the booth, kneel down, and pray for a while before I cast my ballot on taxpayer property. And I think that it wouldn't hurt, because I notice people in restaurants. It always stands out, the ones that pray. It wouldn't hurt for you to walk up to that little thing that stands there and just pause a moment and make it real clear. If George Washington did, you can. And I'm tired of the rewriting of American history to fit the perverted agenda of 4 or 5% of our population. She closed her article by saying, as 21st century American families, let's be diligent in recognizing God's hand in the founding of our country and commit to encouraging our nation's leaders to continue to seek God for wisdom and guidance as He continues to govern in the affairs of men. Stand with me, everybody. I want everybody to stand, and I want you to say, I commit. And then we're going to read those words. See where it says, commit to? If you will, join with me in saying, I commit to encouraging our nation's leaders to continue to seek God for wisdom and guidance as He continues to govern in the affairs of man. Now put your hand heavenward and say a prayer. Put your hand heavenward and say a prayer that God will bless America, a nation founded on Christian faith. Father, keep us, guide us. And Father, I ask you to prod the leaders of this nation at every level, federal, state, and local government, to be righteous and to remind them that only God Himself truly offers freedom and that He must be honored, and that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that builds it, and except the Lord keep the city, the watchman wakes in vain. And everybody said, amen. Now you may be seated. Somebody said, well, where's the Bible being preached this morning? Proverbs 14:34. Proverbs 13:40 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So I'm looking at our homeland. And when I look at our homeland, I see that America has a history of faith. But today, I see something else. I've got some Pilgrim and Puritan in my bones. And I look out at a land, and I see America as ready for harvest as when the Pilgrims first landed. I see America as a harvest field. All of November, we're taking up our harvest offerings. And we, without question, are going to continue to support ministries like the one I named earlier, and ministries that are touching the world. And when I preach next Sunday, I think you're going to be surprised at what God says about the subject I'll talk about. And it won't be made in America, but it'll be something very moving. And then the following week, it's going to take people that the Holy Spirit speaks to take the leap of faith I'm going to take to do what I feel the Lord said to me on the runway of John Wayne in Orange County, leaving to return here to preach this message. I believe in the harvest. But this is not the same world that we had in 1950. This is not the same world we had in 1970. This is not the same world we had in 1980. South America is predominantly Christian when it was not. Africa, by populace percentage, is the strongest Christian nation on the planet. Why? because in the 30s and 40s, we began sending our missionaries to Africa. Long before that, England sent missionaries to Africa, like David Livingstone and other great missionaries. Other parts of the world have become Christian, while our nation, well, let me just tell it like this. I watched many a pastor his church. I watched many evangelists hold his revivals. I even watched missionaries go win the world. And their own children did not follow God. Diane and I were determined we would not be that kind of a family. And not only is Diane an ordained minister, ordained 5 years before myself, and I'm an ordained minister. I have 45 years as an ordained minister. She has 50. And so together, my son Marty would say that means together they've got, he wouldn't give the right number. He'd say 430 or something. It's actually 95. So we're nearly 100 years old, Marty would sum up. But I want you to know that it would have little meaning to us if there wasn't a Sean that's leading his family. We'll have Christmas again with him. And I love Christmas with Sean's family. I've never been around a family that does what they do and all the candle lighting and traditional church things with the teaching that goes with it, so that their children are rooted in the doctrines of the Apostolic Creed and the founders of Christianity, not just from the early days of Pentecost, but from the earliest days of Christianity. It's fascinating. I love it. It would have little meaning to me to stand up today and say, I'm your pastor, if I didn't have a son bigger than me. I wear 11, he wears a 13, that's also a pastor. America, we sent the missionaries to change the world, and our own kids have went to pot. No pun intended? No, that pun was intended. And we deserve better than that. Jeremiah looked at a nation that was just like ours. The parallels between the backsliding of Israel and the backsliding of America are so unique. So let me quickly give you this. Has a nation changed its gods, which are not gods? Has America changed its religion? Could I just tell you that one of the more popular holidays now is Halloween, and that as Christianity is losing a foothold, Halloween is becoming the predominant thing. And they say the reason is economic. Some people just aren't that bright, I'm sorry, but we can't afford Christmas no more, so we're going to celebrate witches and ghosts and goblins and monsters, and going to worship on a night that the occult and the world of darkness has long focused on. It's not a coincidence that we can say Happy Halloween and there be no news report, but let the business say Merry Christmas. In fact, many businesses have instructed their employees they can't say Merry Christmas. Now, it's interesting. The Labor Relations Board, appointed by our current president, just in the last month passed a new law that says employers cannot require their employees to be courteous to customers. Now that tells you somebody up there toward the top doesn't understand business. While we've passed that one, we don't care if they forget Merry Christmas and say Happy Halloween. Well, I say to hell with Halloween. Every now and then I have to do something to get any remaining tidbit of religious spirit out of this church. And I think the last little vapor just left. See, if people just changed gods, that'd be one thing. But the problem is they change it for a God that's not God. Verse 13, for my people have committed two evils. They've forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewn themselves cisterns, broken cisterns, that have no water. Folks, our prosperity and the posterity's prosperity, our children's prosperity, is more dependent on our faith and our honoring of God than it is any other one factor in commerce or industry. What makes a nation great? What causes a people to rise up and be industrial giants? What kind of teaching? Years ago, when a man from Europe came, he just couldn't figure out how America had become the dominant nation of the world. And this would have been in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he came to America and he toured to see what was the secret so he could take it back to Europe. And he couldn't lay a finger on it. And then somebody invited him to church. And when he heard the preaching, he said, I've discovered why America is what America is. Because the people go to church on Sunday and the kind of fiery messages fire the people up to go out and be some of the most productive, ingenious, intuitive, creative people that's ever lived on the planet. Let them badmouth us. Let them say all they want. Let somebody run around and apologize for us. All I would say is you wouldn't have to be apologizing for us if we hadn't a backslid. Because we started right. And since you started right, then let's get back right. And once we get back right, let's stay right. And I call on the 30 and under to study American history and find out what happened in 16, 17, 18, and 1900. And instead of making fun of older people because they don't understand something about the internet or an iPad or anything like that, I want to tell you, wake up. Wake up and realize that you're going to have to do more than just text the rest of your life to make a living. The reason you can spend all of your time on an iPad, an iPod, or texting your buddies is because somebody somewhere is still working the old-fashioned way to make a living, to put clothes on your back and food in your belly. And thus saith Johnny Wade. It's harvest time. When Jesus sent them out to harvest, he said, do not go into the way of the Gentiles. Do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. See, Jeremiah was preaching to a lost nation. When Jesus sent out his first missionaries, he didn't send them out to the farthermost parts of the earth. He said, don't even mess with the Gentiles. Go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And I want to say to you, there comes a time when you've got to focus on your own. And somewhere I call upon the elders of this house and the mission families of this house as we begin to sit down and put together 2013 missions. We have to recognize it's not the same world it used to be, and America is the new mission field. Go to your own first. And as you go, preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. He also says in Matthew 10, as he continued this discourse, this is kind of like the P.S. at the bottom of the sending. We started at verse 5 and read down through 8. Now we're dropping to 16. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Wise as serpents, harmless as dove. It is going to take people who do not compromise character and who have integrity toward the Christian faith, but who also have some tact and some wisdom to function and preserve Christianity. Some of the old methods of evangelism will not even work now. And we're going to have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. How are we going to do that, Pastor? There's only one thing I know that can actually come into a person's life and give them enablement beyond their own ability. As I told you, everything about my heritage and my environment as a child made me a little more of a commanding type leader. I have the softest, tenderest heart of anybody in the world, but my heart has often been betrayed by my mouth, because it's so easy for a Sloan to be sarcastic. We tend to be sarcastic. And sometimes sarcasm is good, but most of the time it doesn't gain us anything. And I think Pastor Marty probably had more wisdom than anybody that ever worked here, and I'll just put him at the top of all of us. And Marty taught staff after he left here and taught Pastor Curtis, and Pastor Curtis said it meant the world to him when Marty taught him this. He said, "My dad, Pastor Sloan, is almost always right, but he doesn't always say it or present it in the most receivable manner. If you can get beyond how he says something and pay attention to what he says, you will be further down the road because of it." Well, I'm working on the how he says it. Because I know my heart. But I'm also strong enough that if need be, I'll give my life. Because between the verses we read, between 8 and 16, he talks about him being delivered up and being arrested and being put in prison and the things they would go through for their faith. And I can tell you that it takes somebody with a real backbone to actually look in the face of the demonic powers that we face. So I intend to have the corduroy, the blue denim, and the lace. I intend to be the canvas and the silk. I intend to have the balance of things in my ministry. And I want to be a pastor that people are not afraid to talk to. But underneath the shell I try to put now, as I've often had a hard shell over a soft heart, I'm going to try to have a soft shell over a strong heart. And as I try to do that, just know this: I'm on a mandate. I don't know if I will live 1 more year, 2 more, 5 more, 10 more, 20 more. I don't know, but I can count. And I'll be 63 before I preach next Sunday, so you better go out today and get a funny card, because November the 9th, I'll be 63. And I want you to know that I am on a mandate. I reread it this morning when God gave it to me in 2009. I digging through all my drawers, I was going through past years and came across that, and I was like, I need to leave that back on the top of the desk again. It used to be on top of my desk for a couple of years. Need to put it back. I'm on a mandate. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to preserve the best of what we've had in the past. I'm on a mission to enrich the rich heritage of our house. And I'm on a mission to connect with the next generations and to see that flaming fire that burned in founders burn in them. And them to know the truth. And they to be able to stand up in their generation. America must have a revival. And when you go to vote, think about praying and vote as the Holy Spirit leads you.